So now, on this lecture, I'm going to get to the thinking processes that get us into trouble, but also are the same thinking processes that make us what we are, make us so successful. And I'll just focus on one of the many, many systems that psychologists have developed over the years for talking about two different systems of thinking. They don't quite map onto each other, but they're close enough so that there's always one system that is more primitive that we share with the other animals. It's early in our evolutionary history, and it's an autonomous system. They call it, sometimes they call it system one. It's an automatic system. It's a system that's triggered by things in the environment. Doesn't need any conscious thinking and stuff like that. And through evolution, probably, we didn't have the luxury to spend time thinking and doing scientific type thinking, deliberate thinking. So we share with the rest of the animal world this system whereby most of what we do is triggered by things in the environment. We don't have to think about it, it's just automatic. And in fact, some psychologists have actually studied another phenomenon, and it's controversial, but they say that most of what we do, that we think we are consciously doing, we are not. We are confabulating. We automatically have done something before we decided what to do. It's been triggered by things in the environment, and we make up a story, convince ourselves that we deliberately did that. It's called confabulation. There's a lot of good evidence for that, but it's very disturbing to many people, so it gets into the whole free will controversy and so on. But so anyways, everyone agrees that we have this something called this automatic system. There's two things about it. Parts of that system is hardwired, so that a lot of things are instincts, we might want to call them, or things like that, that automatically are like a reflex, like knee reflex and stuff like that. But there are things that we do that triggered, and that built in, that wired in. But other things that aren't wired in, aren't instinctive originally, we can automate by practice, like driving a car, for example, just a standard example. When we first learning to drive a car, we have to pay attention with our conscious mind and think about each step, and we can't think about anything else, and it's easily disrupted. But after some years, actually, after a while, it becomes automated, and it's now not part of our conscious system. We drive and do all kinds of other things. So that's what's called the system one. And then there's the second system, which apparently comes around quite late in our history, and it only makes sense to have such a system to override the other system when we have time to think, when we're not have to react all the time to immediacy of what's around us. And that's called different names, but I like Keith Stanovich's particular way of putting this. A little more sophisticated than others, but he's done a lot of work, and his colleagues, and he does takes into account all the other ways of looking at it, and then he has his own way of putting all this together. So on this thing, we can look at this particular, this is one example. This is from one of Keith Stanovich. Keith Stanovich, by the way, a most interesting book of his books. He's written several books. But one of his earliest books, which is paperback, very well worth reading. It's called Who is Rational? Wonderful title, and it's an excellent book. Another book, there's actually, I'm going to recommend 3 books right now of his. The second book is What Intelligence Tests Miss, basically, what they don't take into account. And excellent there, because it makes a distinction between being intelligent and being rational, being smart. The two aren't the same thing. And a third book of his is in a different genre. It's called Critical Thinking, How to Think Critically About Psychology. But actually, it's a good general book about critical thinking in general. It's in its 10th edition now. And I highly recommend those, and later I'll give some other recommendations. In fact, on the course guide, we will have some further recommendations. The one thing I want to say again, emphasize again, the limitations of these books. There are a lot of good books in rational thinking. It's a big field now. But again, to my taste, they undervalue the importance of having good information to begin with in the first place. They teach you how to think about the information you have, but they don't quite teach you well enough how to make sure the information you have is worth thinking about. And that's very important. And that's what the key bending was all about too, was to emphasize that unaided observation, we're going to give you data, but that data is contaminated and it's going to contaminate your mind. So in order to have uncontaminated data and uncontaminated mindware, you want to know what is good data and how to make sure you get that before you waste your time thinking about it. Okay, so this is from, I think, one of his later books. You got 4 or 5 books there, and look at Amazon.com. This is one of his breakups. This is type 1 processing, sometimes it's called, or system 1, is the autonomous mind, and this is the mind I've been talking about that's automatic. That's what it's evolution we share with all other animals. It's the one that's triggered by things in the environment. It's automatic. Now, the type 2 processing, which other people just have another system called system 2, and that's what Kahneman in his book on fast and slow thinking, this is the fast thinking, because it's fast. You can handle a lot of things at once. It doesn't use many what we call cognitive resources. This is a very limited resource system, the type 2 processing, and it can only handle one thing at a time, basically. You can only think one thing at a time when you're working at system. So the problem is that, by the way, and the system 2 can override many times this thing, and that protects us from doing a lot of stupid things sometimes. So there can be an override of system 2 type processing on type 1 processing. We don't always do that, but sometimes it's worthwhile to do that. Now, we have something else here I got to point out, is that there are people who make a big deal about something called mindfulness and mindlessness. And a psychologist has made a big deal about it, and she's written several books about it, and most of what she has to say is worthwhile, but in a sense there are problems, because being mindful means you're using this type 2 processing. Remember, type 2 processing is very, very labor intensive. In other words, it's very cognitively costly. It takes a lot of resources, and you only can handle one thing at a time with it. So you want to be careful how you apply this. You want to allocate it to important things. And so if you try to be mindful about everything, you're going to be just like the the centipede, who, when you get it to think about how it walks, it suddenly can't walk. It moves each of the 100 legs, okay? So this is the problem with, you can't be mindful about everything. You got to know how to allocate your resources, as I would say. So that's important to keep in mind. You can't be, but because of that, these limitations, it's a real severe limitation. This mind here, which works automatically and stuff like that, doesn't take much resources, and you can just do it, without having to think. This later system, it does take a lot of resources, and it takes time to apply, and but you can't apply it too much. And as I said, it's pretty clear that this system developed later in the life of humans when they had some leisure time, which mostly they didn't have. They had to act immediately. They didn't have time to sit and think and do scientific experiments in the old days. But in the last few hundred years or so, with the scientific revolution stuff, people had more time, and they can now devote time to long-term thinking and slow thinking, as it's called. But many people revere that kind of thinking, but it's the two together that's important. Stanovich breaks this down, the type 2 one, into two types of systems. I won't go into much detail about it, but the algorithmic mind basically corresponds to, I'll simplify it, to intelligence, basically. What's called the fluid intelligence. It's the fluid intelligence. There's two kinds of intelligence, we think. One kind of thing that intelligence tests for measuring are things, knowledge that you should know, that you learned. if you've ever taken an intelligence test, you know some of the things are asking you questions about facts. That's something you have to learn. But the other parts of the test are supposed to be testing things that have nothing to do with content, the facts that you know, but how your ability to handle it, to think logically or do other things like that. And so that's called the fluid intelligence, is the kind which where it's not dealing with the facts you've accumulated, but how you can do things. So this is called, but it corresponds to what roughly intelligence tests measure here. But as he makes a distinction, which other people don't make, is that you got to have a different kind of mind, a third system called reflective mind. And a reflective mind is the kind of mind, is the thing of, has more to do with what I would call disposition, rather than the algorithmic mind. Is talking about a capacity, your ability, your capacity to handle certain things, to deal with a certain amount of information, and to handle so much information in short-term memory. These are what we call, these are things that are, have to do with capacity. But having the capacity to do something doesn't mean you're going to do it, use it that way. So you may have a lot of intelligence, that's the algorithmic mind. You may be very good at it, you may have and many people do, but that doesn't mean you're going to use it correctly. And how you dispose of it becomes more of a temperamental or dispositional thing. So what's to some extent I think he's right. What Stanovich says, we got to separate rationality from intelligence. And that's what his book on what intelligence tests don't measure. Intelligence tests don't measure how you're going to dispose of this. And it's a matter of a disposition, your attitude towards wanting to get the things right, wanting to get this right. Now, doing with that kind of a system, I'm going to go on to here. I want to show you something. He does something fascinating to me, because this is what why I'm interested in reading this stuff and knowing this stuff. Is he develops this is the one I want to use here. Okay. Can we read that? I know it looks complicated, but let me show you what he's doing here. He's trying to make a taxonomy of all the different ways we can go wrong, which is fascinating. And he's actually tried to develop measures of this too, which no one's ever done before, you know. So this is a big project he has. And basically he breaks things down first into two different things, the cognitive miser and the mindware problems. The cognitive miser is a system of where it means that because the system is so hard to use, the system, this reflective mind, you have to think about it, you have to deliberately use it. You know, as I said, it's cognitively demanding. So there's a tendency to not override, to rely on your type 1 processing, your intuitions or whatever you feel like, rather than sit through and work it through. Let me give you one problem that demonstrates this. Here's a couple of problems, but this one here is, here we are. We got to get the system right here. Okay. Let's go to the first one. I think let's do all three problems, because they all relate to what Stanovich is talking about. How many animals of each kind did Moses take into the ark? Now, do you have what's your first reaction?
It was Noah.
Noah, okay. But many people don't get that. It's called the Moses problem. But if you say how many people of each kind did Jesus take on the ark, most people really they realize it's wrong. It was Noah, right? But if you get Moses or some other people, because it's close enough, most people overlooked it. They overlooked that, and they're focusing on the ark and how many were taken in, so they all say 2. But you're different. You're not disposed that way. But this is something. This is here's a case where you have to override system 1 thinking. System 1 thinking just automatically is triggered by ark and something close to Noah, Moses, biblical stuff. And so answer 2 comes out automatically under those situations. Your cognitive system, if you stop to think about it with system 2, you realize that it wasn't Moses, you know. But you have to stop and think about that. So it's true. Okay, here's another one. Jack is looking at Anne, but Anne is looking at George. Jack is married, but George is not. Is a married person looking at an unmarried person? And you're given 3 simple choices: yes, no, or cannot be determined. Think about it for a while, and
C.
what's that?
C.
C. Okay, how many people say C? Okay, this is the most common reaction, and it shows that you cut it right. It's
Married. Jack is married. Oh, I see.
But we don't know Anne's situation.
and because people don't know Anne's situation, they feel that's indeterminate, right? But okay, let's go through it step by step now. Okay, Jack is looking at Anne. Jack is married, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so Jack is looking at. We don't know whether Anne is married or not, right? But let's pretend. Let's first pretend that Anne is married. Okay. Okay, if we pretend Anne is married, how does this come out? If Jack,
yes.
what's that?
Then yes.
Okay, then yes. Okay, now let's pretend Anne is not married. Let's say she's not married. Okay.
Then it's not.
Work it out now.
It is a married person. Jack is married.
Right.
And if she is married, then the answer is it's a married person looking at an unmarried person. That's C.
No, it's not C.
No, she's yeah. The married person and an unmarried person. If she's not married, and Jack is the one doing the looking.
Jack is married, so a married person is looking at an unmarried.
It's a married person looking at an unmarried person. But Anne is looking at George. Jack is married, but George is not. Oh
Yes.
no.
Okay, well, it's a lot of those, this is called a disjunctive thinking type of problem. Very difficult, and it's a purely has to be a purely a type 2 type of processing, a reflective mind type of thing. But the problem is that the simplest way of reacting to it is almost a type 1 reaction. It's, you don't know what Anne is, so it's okay. But the question is not whether Anne, it's not Anne, is a married person, okay? So, but you can look at it both ways. First, assume Anne is married, okay? If Anne is married, then Jack is looking at a married person, but Anne is a married person looking at an unmarried person, right? Okay, is that right?
My friend is doing.
Okay, now let's say Anne is unmarried, okay? If Anne is unmarried, then Jack is looking at an unmarried person, right?
So a married person is looking at an unmarried
Right,
person.
in both cases. Whether she's married or not, either way, there's got to be a married person looking at an unmarried person, right? And that's called disjunctive thinking. Very hard, very difficult to do, but you only can do it through a type 2 processing. But this is a very powerful one because almost everyone goes, and as was done here, only one person did not raise their hand. Everyone went for C here, even here.
We didn't plug in the 2 possibilities.
That's right, and it's because of the. And so this is a prime example of measuring a type 2 thing, and it's a cognitive miser type of situation. It shows that we tend to be cognitive misers. It's easier to just assume, take for granted that we don't know anything about Anne, so the thing is undetermined, okay? And then now this one is, this comes from Kahneman, who got the Nobel Prize, so you want to pay attention. You may get a Nobel Prize too. Okay. But it's an old one. Used to use it for years in my class too. A watch and a watch band cost $110 in total. The watch costs $100 more than the band. How much does the band cost? What's your first reaction? Most people your first reaction is going to be what?
It's $10.
Okay. But then if you stop and do what most people don't do, but it's a type 2 process, you go back and look to see what it's a type 1 reaction to say 10, because 110 dollars and $10 for the band. There's a difference of $10. So that's the type 1 reaction, is to immediately say 10. But the type 2 thing is to go back and look over that now.
It's 60.
Not 60, I think it's going to be something like 95 and 5, I think, right?
5 cents.
Yeah, because what happens is if you said 10, the answer can't be done, it can't be right. You go back and then check it out. And again, it's a type 2 thing to go back and check out a type 1 reaction.
Can you walk through that answer?
Yeah.
Give us a moment to figure it out.
Okay, the way I did it, by the way, would do it, but only because I have the right mindware. I use simultaneous equations. But that's not the way most people do, because they're not going to think of simultaneous equations, right?
It costs $5.
Yeah, but the way to think about it, though, is this. You want to say, everyone wants to say $10, right? But if they say $10, then you add it up, it's not going to add up to 110, right? So you got to adjust it, and then you can do it, and then you can adjust it without knowing simultaneous equations. You can just play around and do it. Most people can, then you get down to $95, I think. And
Well, 100 plus 10 is 110.
100 plus 10 is 110, yeah. But 100 more? But $100 is not 100.
100 more than 10 is 110.
100 more than 10 is 90.
Oh,
It used to be.
no, 100 more than 10.
190 cents, 90.
Yeah, that's the problem. 100 more than 10.
Right. That's, you got it now?
Yeah.
Okay. Everyone got it?
That is so good.
Okay. So these sort of simple problems, they get a Nobel Prize for, you know. Kind of got Nobel Prize for things like that, right? For free.
Okay, so 100.
Okay, so this gives you a little bit of the flavor of type 1, type 2 thinking, and so on. Another part of it, which I think is important for other reasons, some people heard of Sherlock Holmes, I guess. And by the way, I find Sherlock Holmes very fascinating. I've always been fascinated by Conan Doyle. Conan Doyle was the epitome of a split personality in some ways, I guess. I don't know. His detective, Sherlock Holmes. I've read every one, the whole, everything. There's only 2 times in the whole canon of Sherlock Holmes stories where there's a paranormal situation comes up, and each time Holmes debunks it. The guy who writes Sherlock Holmes, Arthur Conan Doyle, was the other way completely. He believed in everything. In fact, twice Sherlock Holmes is killed off in the stories, and some people theorize that this was the part of him. Sherlock Holmes was the rational part of him that kept blocking his desire to believe completely in all kinds of crazy stuff, fairies and so on. And so some people speculate, that's crazy psychology perhaps, but they speculate that his killing off Sherlock Holmes was to get rid of this one thing that's inhibiting him from believing 100% in all the stuff he wants, because it's a logical part of him. So twice he did kill him off, and he had to bring him back because of popular outcries. But anyways, this is one from one of his Sherlock Holmes stories. I think this is The Hound of the Baskerville, I think it is. No, this Silver's Blaze, I'm sorry. Is there any other point to which you wish to draw my attention? To the curious incident of the dog in the nighttime. This is Sherlock Holmes talking about that. And Watson says, the dog did nothing in the nighttime. Holmes says, that was a curious incident, remarked Sherlock Holmes. And the reason I like that is because it brings up a very important point I want to keep emphasizing throughout any kind of course like this, is that one of the biggest weaknesses of all of us is that we always focus on what does happen and not on what didn't happen. And sometimes it's what didn't happen is the most important part to think about. And when we get to the framework, I'm going to keep emphasizing that because the prediction came true, it doesn't really show us much until we know what the alternatives would be. And we rarely think about it. It's just not natural for us to think about the alternative things, outcomes that could have happened as well under the same circumstances. And it's very, very important. It's the biggest failing, I think, in many medical situations as well. But anyways, so that's a couple of things I want to alert you to on the psychology of thinking, maybe some of the latest things. Now let me give you some more examples, some of my favorites over time. In fact, there's lots of them, but I'll just give you a few. I'm going to begin with the boomerangs I have here. Okay. This is one. You really want to don't have any other parts. Okay, so these. Let's take this. We've got a white boomerang and a sort of non-white boomerang. Okay, and let's say Mrs. Apple takes her two daughters to the exploratorium, and they're selling at the store. They're selling boomerangs. Okay. And the daughter who has the white boomerang is very unhappy. She's crying and crying. And she's unhappy because why? Why is she unhappy?
Because hers is smaller.
Hers is smaller. And larger is bigger, is better in our world now, right? So she's crying because hers is smaller. So Mom, Mrs. Apple, says, well, I'll fix that. She goes down, she stretches it out. And sure enough, now, I'm sorry, let's do it this way. Okay, here we are. There. Now, hers is bigger, but the other girl is unhappy now, right? So, Mrs. Apple stretches that one out, and when she does it, now the first daughter is happy again, but the second daughter is unhappy, right? I love this because it's an example of what I call, it illustrates, by the way, perception and cognition are very closely bound together. In fact, we can't really separate them out. Perception is a little bit more automatic than cognition, but the same principles hold for both. And in this case, it's an example of what I would call assimilation contrast, a very important principle. What's happening here is that when I'm showing you this way, by the way, if I show them this way, they look the same size, don't they, to you?
Yes.
They do that because the most adjacent feature that when you're comparing two objects, we always do this, it's natural for us, we focus on the most adjacent thing, what's closest between them, the borders between them, the boundaries between them. And we exaggerate those boundaries to see how different they are. If I'm holding it this way, the two inner boundaries, which are the shorter ones, are the thing of focus. When I put it this way, now this boundary and this boundary become the thing of focus that we're thinking about. So you assimilate this to its boundary for this purpose, and you assimilate this to its boundary, which is the longer one, and as a result, this one looks shorter and this one looks longer. If I switch them around, then reverse that, because now this becomes the most salient thing for which we're recognized. That's why this notion goes all the way to things like, instead of calling the United States, we talk about Washington. And we talk about, we sometimes use the capital of a country to represent the whole country. So as a part is representing the whole. In this case, the part here is standing for the whole, because that's what's important for this comparison.
What's amazing is that even though you know it,
Right.
your brain is still telling you.
That's right. Sometimes some of these illusions you can correct, some you cannot. That's what I find fascinating. By the way, the more I push them apart, I think it makes it harder. It makes it less weakens it, because now by spreading it out like this, these don't become that important. It becomes the whole thing becomes important.
So what we're perceiving is the long edge of one compared to the
Right,
small
exactly.
edge of the other.
You're using your mind is automatically this becomes now the surrogate for the whole thing. And this becomes a surrogate. This is my explanation of it. On most illusions, by the way, psychologists have all kinds of arguments about it still, but this is my explanation. I think it's correct because it's my explanation, right? This is another human feeling. Okay. Now, okay, let me go on a few more like that, because these all make very important points about our minds, the way they work and don't work. This is some of my favorites here. There are hundreds of them, by the way, you can find anywhere. But over the years, one of my favorites here. Let me put this on here. Now, I want you to read that to yourself. Okay, can everyone read that important sentence to yourself? Read it. Okay. Now you've read it, I want you to do one thing. I want you to pay attention to the number of F's in that thing. The F's, A, B, C, D, E, F, the letter F. Count the number of F's. I'm not going to give you too much time, but count the number of F's that you find in that sentence. Okay, I'm going to take it away now. You need more time?
Yeah. More.
Okay.
Start over now, too.
Okay. Count the number of F's.
Hold on.
Okay.
Wait.
Okay, I'm going to take it away now. Okay. How many got the 3 F's? Okay, you're unusual. About 80% of the people in almost every way I've been in raise their hand and say you got 3 F's. How many got some other count?
6.
6? How many got 6? 1? Because you had more time than most people too. Okay. How many got some other number?
I got 6 the first time and 5
Okay.
the second.
What's that?
I got 4.
4, okay. Most people, and you do it most of the time I've done it, and I've got I've done it over 50 years. I've been working with this, and I love it. About 80% get 3 F's. And I don't give them much time, of course. And
They're leaving out the of, huh?
what's that? It's the ofs, right. Now you know. Okay, let me show you what the F's that are missed. I have to show some people. So I did this, I made this one. So you can see where the 6 F's are. Now this is what I call multi-determination. More than one thing is involved here. One of the things, and it turns out there have been I had colleagues do some experiments, and it's true. Just the sound of the F, the 3 F's that people get have an F sound. When I ask it, the F sounds like F. But the F's in of, the 3 ofs, that doesn't have an F sound. And I never believed that. I thought that was because that's not the most important factor, but it is a factor. I've had people check it out and stuff like that, and it is a factor. It does contribute to the effect. Another thing that contributes to the effect is more important, is that of what's called function words, of, the, and stuff like that, they're the most frequent words in the name, but they're connected, they're function words. They don't really carry any content. When people are reading, especially if you're a speed reader, if you're a good reader, you're reading for, you don't need to look specifically at the content words. You can fill those in yourselves, and you're looking for the words that carry most content, the nouns and the verbs. And as a result, you're less likely to notice the F's and the ofs just because they are function. Of is not an important word. In that sense, it's one of the most frequent words in the language, and you can skip by that. You can fill it in yourself. And there's a third reason. Can anyone guess what the third reason is? Remember, it's deliberately constructed. Why did I construct it that way? Look at it again. Where are the F's that you got, that most people do get? The 3 F's that they get, where are they?
They're at the margins of the text.
Well, 2 of them are at the beginning of the text, and this is called the, there's two most important parts of any series you give people. There's the beginning and there's the end parts. And when we do memory work, have people remember lists of words and stuff like that, it's the words at the beginning, that's called the beginning effect, and the words at the end are what they pick up most. And the ones in the middle are least likely. So by putting the 2 of the F's at the beginning, it's more likely you're going to pick up those 2 F's. So now we're focusing on not on what you missed, but the ones that you do get. Now, what about the third one?
The end of the line.
It's hyphenated deliberately. I worked it out so it's hyphenated. That brings attention to it, right? So it's broken up. So in a way, I'm doing what a magician does. He's calling attention to what he wants you to pay attention to, which means you're withdrawing attention to what I want you to not to pay attention to. So that's involved too. So this is an example of something that has actually three different things going for it. And as I said, if I don't give people too much time, about 80% get 3 Fs. And very few get to 6 Fs. So that, I like that. So it's an example of where several things are involved at once. We're taking advantage of it. Now, let me do it. This is another one. I love this because it's an important principle, but it's a nice simple thing. You can see that we have this circle here, sort of gray circle, and it's against two different backgrounds. Now, I apologize to you, but this deliberately, I'm putting you in the state of conflict. Your mind is upset because I'm pitting two things against one another. I'm pitting what is called simultaneous contrast, a very important principle. And simultaneous contrast says, look, that, I'll do it over here, that if you have something like this against a black dark background, it's going to look bright by contrast, that it really is. On the other hand, if you have something like this against a white background, it's going to look darker than it is by contrast. That's called simultaneous contrast. Yet, you don't tend to see it that way. You tend to see it all the same color. So I'm going to relieve your mind. I'm going to help you unstress yourself. But I'm going to give you an excuse to treat the two halves of the circle somewhat different by putting a boundary on here, like that. Now to do that, look what happens. Can you see now that the contrast is real? That the right side is darker than the left side? Because I've given your mind an excuse to treat them as two separate objects. But now you're in conflict because you know this is the same object and you want what we call constantly, the priority is to make that object as uniform, as homogeneous as possible. And so you're trying to make it all the same. So you're ignoring the fact that your perceptual system wants to see this contrast. Because what's overriding is that this is wants to see this as a single object. And by a single object, it wants to see everything within that object as homogeneous. It's another example of what we call simulation and contrast. And that appears that I will demonstrate and talk about later. It's going to be a very important principle in understanding why smart people can be so stupid, okay? Now, let me try this one, okay. How many have ever seen this before? Okay, if you've seen it before, then you're don't.
Cool.
Okay, do you others who have never seen it before, can you recognize what it is?
It's spotted dog.
Okay, you ever see the dog? Okay. Once you see it, by the way, at first, before you see it, you can make all kinds of things out of it, but it's something. But once you see it, what it is, once you recognize what it is, and I usually, sometimes I have people who've never seen it before, so I have to help them out. So there you can see that's where the dog is. Once you organize it that way, you might organize it, you can't go back. It's almost impossible to undo it. This is related, this is in the perceptual system, but it's also related to what we call belief perseverance in the psychological system. I mean, once you've created a belief, and it's almost impossible to undo it, to disbelieve it. The classic example of belief perseveration was done by, at Stanford by Lee Ross and his companions, very interesting people. But this was done back in the 70s, actually, very important. They did it with suicide notes. They brought students in, these Stanford undergraduates, and to the laboratory, and they said, look, we're trying to see how good people are recognizing who's going to commit suicide and who doesn't. So here we have a bunch of notes written by some people who actually committed suicide, and other people who are faking it, didn't commit it. Once you can tell by reading which, sort them into two piles, and see how well you can do in sorting out which letters are fake suicide notes and which are real suicide notes. They had people do that. Well, they were nasty, social psychologists, and I'm glad I'm not a social psychologist. They're nasty people. And they create a bad reputation for other psychologists. They're always doing tricks on people, right? When people sorted their things out, half the people they told deliberately, you got 80% right. And the other half they told, you got only 20% right. It didn't make a difference because all of them were fake anyway, they just made them up. But they wanted to know how people would react to that. And then they asked the people afterwards, why did you do this? And they had good stories about it. Well, I've always been a sensitive person, and I'm so good at it. The people that told that they had 80% right. Now they said, you did pretty well on that. How can you explain that? They come up with reasons for it. And the other people, the 20% failures, they said, how come you didn't do so well? He said, well, I've never been good at people's stuff or stuff like that, and I've never been that kind of a person. Now, then they have some ethics, and the ethical issue is they have to debrief them, as they call it. You had to tell them that you actually tricked them. So now they're told they were tricked, okay? And it was just chance. What they were told was nothing. A few weeks later, they bring him back, and then I've done over time. There's been kinds of experiments done many times since then. They brought him back and said, okay, how well do you think you could detect suicide notes? How good do you think you would be at it? The people had been told that they had got a good score on it before. Now, no, then were told that this was meaningless. They now still believe that they are good at it. The other people didn't still believe that they're not good at it. And there's several theories about them and working at it, but basically it was that once you've organized your life and around that, the fact that you're good at it, you brought up good reasons, the memory works this way, that now, the next time you're confronted with this thing, you're reminded of how good are you at doing suicide letters. The reasons that you brought up at the time that you asked before you knew that it was a fake, those reasons are what come to mind, or what we call primed, and they come to your mind. And so you think, hey, I'm pretty good at it, because all the good reasons come. Other reasons but the same person, because the way he did the experiment, could have been the person that they told wasn't good at it, and he would bring up good, bad reasons for it. So this is an example, a very powerful example of belief perseverance, and I think it's very, very important in why it's not just that people get fooled. We all get fooled. The point is that once we're fooled many times, we persist in it, and it's hard to get you out of it. There's another one like that, that pictures like that you've seen. Many of you may have seen it. If you haven't seen it before, it's a hard one to come across. But once you see it, you never can unsee it.
You can't unsee it.
Yeah.
You can't unring the bell.
Well, it's just a cow, it's the face of a cow. And it's very hard on enough people who've never seen it before.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah.
Did you
Okay.
see it before?
Well, I wasn't looking.
Okay, here's another one I used to like over the years. I always liked this one here. I call it the invisible rectangle. Yeah, this one. We can do it this one here. Maybe it can work this way. Okay, maybe where you are, maybe I should have a bigger one. But anyways, what I want you to do is I want you to see if it work. If I step back here, it will work for me this way. Yeah, I think it'll work. I want you to hold your hands out so that your right hand is bordering the right hand edge of that rectangle, and the left hand is bordering and keep both eyes open, by the way, as you do this, the left hand side of things. Can you do that? Have you done that? Can you do it? Maybe I should. If you can do it, then after you've done that, hold that, shut one eye, shut your left eye. What happens? Anything happen? Okay, then open your left eye and shut your right eye. What happens?
Oh, my hand's in the wrong place. Oh, is that what paralytic view is? Oh.
Well, if this works right, maybe I should make it bigger or something, but when it works right, what happens is that when you look at it with both eyes open, you see the rectangle, and you think you're seeing it with both eyes. But it's impossible for you to see it with both eyes. So only one eye, your dominant eye, is seeing it, and the other hand is blocking it. So you don't notice that. So your mind, it's not going to allow you to say, hey, one eye is seeing it, one eye is not, so it just suppresses. It fills in actually. It fills in. The eye that's not seeing is actually, your mind is filling in for it. Just like we have a blind spot in our retina, our eyes, we fill that in as well. And by the way, if you haven't thought about it, and I know most of you don't sit around thinking about these things, but some people do. If you think about it, all what you're seeing, this whole scene you're witnessing now, me up here and so on, only a very small little slit, hole in your eye, the pupil, is letting in the scene. At any moment in time, 90% or more than 90% of this visual scene that you're seeing, this whole room, that you see as a whole, you're not seeing. It's impossible, literally. But you fill in. We're always filling in. We're always filling in. We're always adding to it, and we are not always aware of what we're putting there and what is actually literally based on the sensory input we're getting. We're always constructing it, and this is very important to keep in mind.
You said 90% of what's in this room?
Well, the numbers I'm not sure. It's probably more, but it's a huge amount that we're putting in. I'm going to give you other examples of that. But now a favorite of mine is a friend of mine. He's retired since, but one of the most clever psychologists ever. He came up with this. He does very clever artists too. He came up with these. How many of you have seen this? Shepherd's Tables. Okay. This is very powerful. It's very interesting. The thing is that if you take this, consider this as just this flat plane here. This rectangle here is actually identical to this rectangle. If I cut this out and put it on here, it's identical. And everyone says it's impossible. So what have I got here? I think I have a. I have a overlay I had here. What did I do with? Oh, here it is. There it is. Thank you. That's it. Yeah. Okay. So I did this overlay, so you can follow. Let's follow it. Put this over here. Okay. This matches this, right? Okay. No tricks.
Oh, man. Wow.
Okay, what's going on here? Okay, your mind is not made up. We don't live in a flat land. We don't live in flat land. We live in a three-dimensional world, and the mind is made to see things. So when we see this, we automatically see it as three-dimensional. If these were three-dimensional objects, they would definitely not be the same size tabletops. But this is a flat plane here, and so no matter how much you study that, you can't believe that they are literally the same. Yeah. So again, we got to realize we construct around the world around us, and we do this both with our perceptual and the cognitive. Actually, they're very, as I said, tied together. In fact, very much together. There are a few others like that, but I just got one more demonstration I want to do for you, which I think fits into this, I hope. Okay, I got a prediction here, because I knew I was going to do this today.
You probably read most of the books that you got these from.
What's that?
You read most of the books you got them from.
The audience is talking about things that I better not know about. Okay. I have an envelope here in which I've placed, because I knew before I came down to Los Angeles from Eugene, Oregon, where I live, I knew I was going to be giving this lecture and talking about things like this. And so I put in here, I made a prediction of something that's going to happen in the next few moments. About 2.5 minutes from now, okay? So there's a prediction here, which I made before I came down, so there it is, right there. It's all in sight there. You keep one eye on that, one eye on me, and one eye on DJ, and we're all set, okay? So next thing we're going to do, the prediction has to do with the deck of playing cards, which you can see. It's a deck of playing cards. And the prediction is this, at least in part. The prediction is that someone is going to take, well, if I had this prediction, I'd say someone's going to take a playing card, right? And if I had someone take a playing card, and they took the playing card, and they would, because people are nice, and I'm up here, and I'm a visitor to your city, and so you're nice to me, right? I'm a guest. So if I said, would you take a card, someone would oblige and take a card, right? And if you look at my prediction, and it said someone will have taken a card, you would applaud and say, wow, he's the next here he goes. Really, he's great, right? But people aren't impressed when I did that. I used to do that way. So I added something to it. I added what the card is that they picked. Now somehow people are more impressed now. That's the same thing. Most predictions are right. So think about it. Why is one prediction more impressive than the other? I never could figure it out, but anyways, that's what people do. So we're going to have, I'm going to have someone choose one of these cards. Just have you touch one of these cards. Just touch one. This one here?
Sure.
With that one there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you can change your mind if you want.
No.
Okay, so that one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is the one we want you to look at. Fix it in your mind.
Okay.
You all might want to fix it in your mind too. The exact suit and value. Okay? So there's no doubt about it. Okay? You got it? Okay. So now, if my prediction comes out right, you're going to hop, holler, and shout and say, he's it, right? Okay. So what I did was I put a giant replica, a larger replica of a playing card, the one I knew was going to be chosen. I had this prediction. And so I want you to let me know whether this card is exactly suit and value of what you took. Is it?
I think it was 7 of spades.
So, you think 7 of spades? It's close, isn't it? No, okay, that's good for this demonstration. I want you to put your feet flat on the floor. Do you think I can talk you into seeing it as a 7 of spades? Remember, I'm a hypnotist, a mentalist, and stuff like that. I'm going to, now watch. Keep thinking now. Think of 7 of spades. Just breathe in and out, and breathe in and out.
All right.
Okay, breathe in and out. Breathe in and out. Let's see. Now, the reason for this demonstration, by the way, is did you actually see the 7 of spades, or did you think you saw the 7 of spades?
Well, after seeing the clubs, I started doubting myself.
Yeah. Okay, so that brings up the issue of seeing that versus seeing then. The philosophers used to play, the linguistic philosophers was a fad for a while, that kind of philosophy. Ryle and people like that. And they used to talk about seeing that versus seeing as, or something like that. But anyway, the reason I like to do the demonstration like this is it raises the whole question of, for example, if the proverbial man from outer space, there are these people, these visitors that we talk about, these ETs and stuff like that. Well, if they drop down through the ceiling while we're doing this demonstration, would they see the 7 of clubs now? Or what would they see? Would they see the same thing you saw, you're looking at? If they came down here, let's say they have a visual system of some sort, would they see the same thing you're seeing?
My assumption is to say yes.
But what if they had a civilization where they don't have, they don't have any kind of system about our language, they don't know about playing cards and stuff like that, would they still see the 7 of clubs?
No.
What would they see?
They would see lines and shapes that we would know as.
So they would not be seeing the same thing you're looking at. You're seeing, they wouldn't see the same thing you see.
Yes, correct.
They might not.
Well, in some sense, they are seeing the same thing you see, in some sense they're not, right?
Right.
Okay, so this raises some very interesting questions, and
But they might notice that your little ones are actually spades.
what?
Your little ones in the corner are actually spades.
Oh, spades, okay, they might not, okay, you're saying something, they might notice that, even though they don't know about spades. Okay,
They'd be shooting.
that's why I said this is a very special audience. You're the first in hundreds of years I've been doing this, but someone noticed that there was spades in the
Well, I
corner.
was at an angle, so even when you were see
Okay,
this one kind
yeah.
of.
And usually I'm on the platform, a little bit distant from people too, so that's, but anyway, this is the end of this thing. All this is important because now we're going to go into the framework, and that's be the next lecture.
Awesome.